Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. It hurts to kill the buzz and the ambience. I'm delighted to see so many of you here, quite a few number of new faces, and an extra warm welcome to you. I hope you've managed to get some lunch and you're seated comfortable. You've made it to the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. Founded in 1902, we were founded by business, for business, and today we strive to create the best capital region in Europe. And we do so focusing in on the city, the people, and the businesses behind it, all sort of focused on the quality of life. In order to achieve this, we turn every leaf in order to look at the attractiveness, the competitiveness, and the innovative power of the city. And that's also why we launched Capital of Tech, which we did, I'd say, about a year and a half ago. For over 2 decades, Stockholm has cultivated an exceptional tech startup ecosystem. Pioneers such as Spotify, Skype, Izettle, King, Klarna have transformed and in some cases also disrupted their industry. So Stockholm has created a bit of a global phenomenon. But now we're asking ourselves in true chamber fashion, how are we doing today? And how are we prepped for what's about to come tomorrow? We think that a strong tech community is so important when it comes to adding oxygen and innovation to the city and into the wider business community. And that's where the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce comes in, representing not just the tech industry, but we're saying that the wider business community think that this is important for the business community. We see other cities and regions doing their utmost, creating a great foundation for tech development. But what can we do in the same fashion to support the community that we have right here in Stockholm? That's why we're also today launching a report. You're either sitting on it or you're reading it into global tech centers. And you'll see that we are comparing Stockholm to 7 other global tech centers, I should say Western global tech centers for the sake of this conversation, such as San Francisco, New York, London, Berlin, etc. What can we learn from others, and what is the tech community itself asking for? That's the foundation of this. My name is Peter Sandberg, and I'm the Deputy CEO of the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. And today we will meet the Canadian ambassador to Stockholm, discussing lessons from Toronto, one of the 8 cities surveyed in this report. We'll chat to 2 tech businesses or tech representatives. And finally, we'll lean into the politics of it all with the former mayor of Stockholm and the former Swedish Minister for Digitization. But first, I'd like to invite my colleague, Emily Nagler, policy analyst at the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, up. She's the author of the report to summarize our findings. Emily, welcome up. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Peter. And as he mentioned, this is our very first tech report that we've done here at the Chamber. And we, as Peter also mentioned, undertook this report to sort of see where are we in Stockholm, how's the tech community doing here, and how do we sort of stack up against other global tech hubs. And in the report, we have looked at London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris, of course, Stockholm, New York, San Francisco, and Toronto. And we want to also kind of talk about what can we do to be better. And the core of this report, we surveyed 100 companies in each of these cities, and we asked them questions about attractiveness, pace of the tech scene, how hard or easy is it to get funding, and also kind of what has the political reception been. So with that in mind, I would like to go through a few of the key highlights. You can read all of them if you have the report, but we're just going to cover a few today. The first point I want to talk about is talent. Of course, this is a big topic, and so this was a very important question for us to ask. And we asked the tech community, which 3 countries are you most seeing in your businesses that you're hiring? Of course, excluding the country that you're based in. So for Stockholm, the top 3 countries we saw most commonly in the survey were Norway, Germany, and the UK. And this kind of shows that Sweden and Stockholm are more of a sort of regional attractor. A lot of the other cities in the report are pulling from much farther away. So that was something interesting we noticed. And then if we look at all of the cities together, the most mentioned countries were India, the US, and the UK. So that's, again, interesting to compare. The next point I want to touch on is the pace. And this is sort of a vague term, and we kind of left it up to the companies we were surveying, how they're interpreting it. But it can refer to things such as how quickly you can hire people, how quickly you can get a product to market, how quickly you can get new investors in. It's sort of the tempo and the pace of how things are moving. And this wasn't a very surprising result. As you can see, the 3 top cities there, London, New York, San Francisco, it's kind of obvious you would expect that, but I think we just found it very surprising that it was so clear in our survey that these cities are really far and above the rest of them. And then the final sort of interesting reflection is that when we asked all the cities, how is the political sphere and how are the politicians supporting you? Are they supporting you? Stockholm fell to the very bottom in this list. So this is something we're hoping we can pull out a bit more later on in the panel.
Thank you, Emily. A great summary. So we've compared 8 cities. Which tech center scored the best?
Yeah, so again, not really surprising, but San Francisco was the #1 city across the whole survey. And it is the clear winner, but I don't know if I would personally say it's the best city. There's a lot of problems in San Francisco, a lot that we don't see here in Europe, a lot of social welfare problems, housing difficulties that are much worse, actually, than here. If we look at some of the open answer questions that we asked, for instance, what are the biggest obstacles? You can see here that there's very different, some similar, but it's clear that there's some issues here in San Francisco that we don't really see in Europe. And again, if we look at another question, internationally competitive, again, homelessness, it's a big problem, and it's something that we even hear about in Europe all the time. So,
but in Stockholm, it was talent at the very
Stockholm is talent.
Yeah. So if San Francisco wasn't that surprising as an outcome, what did surprise you the most when looking through the findings?
Yeah, so what surprised me overall putting this report together was how pessimistic Europe was compared to North America. Just in general, in the open answer questions, and even in some questions such as this one, just the perception of attractiveness, all of Europe is just sort of more negative. And it's not that this is such a bad result here. We're scoring from 1 to 5, and everyone's in 4. But just overall, Europe is just not as pumped as America. So, yeah.
Makes sense. So, and if you were to give, I know there's a number of recommendations or reflections in the report as well, but if you were to give 3 key recommendations based on the findings in the report to Stockholm, what would they be?
Yeah, so the first one would be that politicians need to be champions for tech and the tech community. We need our leaders to understand what's happening in tech. If they don't know what's happening, then we're going to fall behind overall. Second, I would say collaborating across sectors. Stockholm and Sweden are really innovative at its core, and that's what our strength is. And I think if we can just leverage that, and people say it again and again, but if you bring the different sectors together, that's where we're going to succeed.
By sectors, you mean business, academia?
Yeah, exactly, and government, of course. Yeah. And then finally, I would say setting national goals or standards. It can be very vague and kind of fluffy, but it's something that everyone can kind of collectively work together towards. And maybe you don't reach the goal, but you got somewhere, and it's better than where you were before. So.
We're in business. We love the reference. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for producing the report. Everyone, a big round of applause. We're moving on, and as Emily mentioned, our report was referencing Toronto, Canada, and on that note, we're absolutely delighted to have the Canadian ambassador to Sweden with us, Mr. Jason LaTorre. Ambassador, welcome up. I was going to say welcome to Sweden, but you've been here for 3 years, so you've been here longer than I have.
And I just realized I'm wearing something very similar to what's in the picture.
It's your uniform, right?
Yeah.
Ambassador, what are your initial thoughts after reading the report? Does it reflect the image that you have?
I think let me first of all thank the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce for inviting me here today. I'm really delighted to be here. I love talking about Canada. I love talking about tech, and I love talking about the collaboration between Canada and Sweden in technology and innovation. And thank you, Peter, for this opportunity to have this chat with you. I also want to say, Emily, what an incredible job you did on the report. It was really outstanding. I take from it a call to action for governments that we really need to continue to step up. We can't be complacent. We need to continue to set the conditions for a strong innovation ecosystem. And I think that's what I got out of the report, with some really good, strong recommendations. Sorry, what was your question again? Sorry.
But just reflections from the report.
So those were the reflections. That was the main reflection I got from the report.
So in this case, I mean, Sweden and Canada are up against some pretty huge players when it comes to fighting for tech talent and what have you. What do you think makes a city like Stockholm competitive?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that Sweden generally, and Stockholm as well, has a very impressive innovation ecosystem. Sweden often ranks in the top 3 as the most innovative countries in the world. Last year, Sweden ranked number 2 on the Global Innovation Index. And so the perception from Canada, whether we're here or back in Canada, is that Sweden has a very impressive innovation ecosystem, but that doesn't mean we can't get better. But some of the things, what's the catalyst or the catalyst behind that innovation ecosystem? And for me, it's 4, maybe 5 things that I've witnessed since I've been here. The first, and it's very important in my opinion, coming from Canada as well, it's the progressive social policies. And things like universal health care, a strong social welfare system that supports entrepreneurial risk-taking here in Sweden, and that supports a really high living standard, which attracts talent and helps retain talent as well. So that's the first one, the progressive social policies. The second one that I've really been impressed with here is the availability and access to financing. There's, first of all, a number of multinationals here that continue to invest heavily in research and development and innovation. In fact, Stockholm, if we were to focus on Stockholm, it's ranked number 3 for having the most number of global headquarters in Europe after London and Paris. And these multinationals are investing heavily in the innovation ecosystem. Together with multinationals, what I've noticed here is a very impressive, very connected, sophisticated venture capital community, and which is really quite robust. And if you add to that high net worth investors here in Stockholm and across Sweden, and if you add as well a really stable and robust financial and banking system, all of that together is a recipe for a lot of access to financing, which is incredibly important for a strong innovation ecosystem. Third, and this is probably the most important, and that's a deep talent pool. Companies will move where the talent is, and Sweden has a very deep talent pool, in part because of its outstanding education system and its really high-quality universities. I just learned relatively recently that Stockholm region, and I don't know if, tell me if I'm wrong, but Stockholm region has 29 universities. So I was surprised by that. I think 3 of them rank in the first 100 or 200 in terms of global leading universities, and they're right here in Stockholm. And that helps support a really deep talent pool. Fourth, I'm very impressed, although I know it's one of your recommendations, Emily, but I am impressed with how closely everyone works together in this triple helix model, as I've learned it's called early on here. And Canada has a similar model where government and private sector and universities and academia work really closely together. But here in Sweden, I find consultation happens up really early, and people work towards everyone works together towards a common strategic purpose, key strategic sectors, and that really makes a difference. And the final thing, and this is really, I think, the secret behind innovation here, and I uncovered it early on in my assignment, and that is fika. And honestly, fika. And, this idea of setting time aside in the afternoon during a busy schedule to sit down and talk. I mean, not only is that good for mental health and well-being, but I really think it helps promote productivity and innovation. And so for me, fika is a part of it. We need to talk, we need to collaborate, and fikas allow us to do that here in Sweden. If there's something I could bring back to Canada with me, it will be fika.
I love that. So maybe that's why our pace is slightly slower than that of Silicon Valley. But Ambassador, you mentioned talent, and as we discussed in our report, access to talent is absolutely crucial for developing a tech center. How much importance do you place on talent, and what is Canada doing in this space that perhaps we could learn from?
Thanks, Peter. That's a really great question. In Canada, we have a lot of homegrown talent as well, coming out of our university, out of our education system, our universities, and we actually have really good vocational and technological schools too that are providing really practical skills for students in Canada. But in addition to our homegrown talent, our immigration policies in Canada are instrumental to attracting and welcoming really high-skilled professionals from around the world, including many Swedes, actually. We have 350,000 Canadians in Canada, based on the most recent census, identify as having Swedish origin. So we have a really diverse population in Canada, but Canada has really benefited tremendously from our immigration policies. And, in terms of contributing to our economic prosperity, our cultural diversity, our social fabric, it's key in terms of building Canada. It accounts for 100%. Immigration accounts for 100% of our population growth and 100% of our labor market growth. So essentially, no immigration, no labor market growth. And if you don't have labor market growth, it's very hard to continue to build an innovation ecosystem. And so we set really ambitious targets in Canada. And targets are an important aspect, obviously, of a well-managed system, because we need to play with our targets a little bit from time to time, depending on things like our economic objectives, humanitarian responsibilities, community capacity to take on more immigrants. But in 2023, we welcomed 465,000 new permanent residents to Canada, and this year our target is set for 485,000. Of that group, of new immigrants that are coming in, 60% come through what's called our economic class. And these people are based on, they're selected based on education, skills, language proficiency, work experience. And so we can play with this a little bit to help fill labor market gaps in Canada. And incredibly important to our ability to build a highly skilled labor pool. But in addition to our permanent residents, there's an interesting, so basically we have immigration, and then we have people who come to Canada to work or study temporarily. And we have quite an interesting temporary foreign worker program in Canada called the Global Skills Strategy. I always wish they called it the Global Skills Program, but it's called the Global Skills Strategy. It is a program basically allowing employers to very quickly seek out highly skilled professionals from around the world. And this program, which has been around for decades now, this program allows for a really streamlined, rapid work permit process. And it also provides for a dedicated service channel for companies that can call our immigration agency and get customized support. So imagine you can pick up the phone and call your immigration agency, and they'll help you walk you through work permits and so that you can bring in talent quickly. This program allows companies in Canada to bring talent from around the world in roughly 2 weeks. We often say you can get somebody from around the world in Canada before you have time to even set up their laptop. So it's a really successful program and really helps. So top occupations in this program are often like computer programmers, AI engineers, they're other types of sort of from the computer domain, but there's also like university professors who come through this program a lot. So, and then thousands of foreign nationals who come through this program often transition into permanent residence. So that they've got this experience, they've come through Canada in this temporary foreign working program, and then transition into permanent residence and immigrate to Canada fully. So it really, these programs really contribute to, I think, a diverse and thriving and growing talent pool in Canada.
I mean, there's changes to the Swedish migration system now, but that definitely sounds like a more proactive stance in terms of tackling a talent shortage. Now, another conclusion in the report refers to AI and digital infrastructure and how that's sort of going to be a key to Sweden's competitiveness moving forward. The Swedish government launched an AI commission just short of a year ago, looking at, the role of higher education in attracting capital, but also how AI could make public administration more efficient. What role should the government play, in your opinion, in supporting AI development, and what can we learn from Canada?
I think there's two main roles a government can play in this area. One is funding, and one is in terms of setting the regulatory framework, especially for new technologies. So let me touch on the first one. I remember Marcus Wallenberg once said, relatively recently, if you want to lead, you need to invest. And so that's what our Canadian government is doing. We're investing in AI in a big way. So from 2016 to 2023, we invested $2 billion. And this money went to supporting our three leading AI institutes across Canada in Edmonton, Toronto, and Montreal. It went to funding research at our universities across Canada. And there's been so much of these research grants provided to our universities that our universities have really risen to the top in terms of specific AI indicators. And so these research grants have been extremely helpful as well. And then our funding went to one of our innovation clusters. We have 5 innovation clusters in Canada. The Canadian government made a big bet on certain clusters, and Scale AI is one of them, and it's based in Montreal. So these investments have not only helped us advance the frontiers of artificial intelligence, but they've also created this really compelling and thriving and dynamic pool of AI researchers, practitioners, and global talent, which are really helping drive our AI developments in Canada. So that was $2 billion from 2016 to 2023. So in our federal budget, 2024, just this year, we doubled down on AI. Literally, we decided to invest $2.4 billion again over a 5-year period. And this funding will go in part to computational power, which is incredibly important to supporting artificial intelligence. And it will go to helping startups and SMEs commercialize new AI technologies and help them deploy AI solutions. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no.
So I know this is going to be a diplomatic nightmare for you, but so the report referenced a lack of political support, in particular in Stockholm, as a sense, I should say, a sentiment amongst the tech community. Is that something? Can you see a difference there? How do you tread carefully?
No comment. No. I read that, yeah. and I think it's important to think about how, we share values, Canada and Sweden. Really, we have common values, shared values across a range of interests, common interests. But there are some things that are a bit different. Our cultures are a little bit different. Our business culture, how we do things are a little bit different. And one of the things I've noticed here is I find that private sector leads here in Sweden, and then government supports. And in Canada, it's a little bit different. I don't know how it's come to this, but in Canada, the Canadian government invests, and then private sector comes in. And it's like private sector waits to see what the government's going, and then that funding helps de-risk the private sector investments. So in Canada, for whatever reason, our governments lead early and invest in areas where we think there is important areas to invest in, like artificial intelligence. I'm actually not sure if one is better than the other. I do like the idea, because private sector, I think, often is the one that knows best where we should be investing. So I like the Swedish model, but it's just a different way of doing things.
And finally, very quickly, what else is happening in Toronto, Canada, that we need to look out for?
So I think what I would say here is. I'll draw on things that I've heard Swedish companies tell me, and there's a lot of interest in Canada among Swedish companies. In the last 5 years, we've had a 300% increase in Swedish investment into Canada, and so these are companies like Ericsson, Northvolt, Volvo Buses, Klarna, Centiro, Mentimeter, have all made investments, some very large ones, into Canada over the last 5 years. And so when you hear what they say about why they made their investments, a lot of them are the same things that came up in the report, everything from talent to infrastructure. There are things like political commitment, it's funding, government support, access to third markets, all of these reasons that come up, and Sweden has all of this too. But one thing, and I should say, just last week, another company just made an announcement, NetLight. I don't know if anybody's here from NetLight.
We know them.
There they are. Okay. So NetLight actually announced last week, welcome to Canada, that they would be establishing their first non-European office in Toronto. And so what we hear from these companies, and it's a little bit hard to quantify, and it's an intangible, but it's values. Values are incredibly important when a company makes an investment. Values and a shared vision of the future. So very quickly, so Northvolt's CEO, for example, they were interested in Canadian critical minerals, renewable energy, our talent, access to the United States market. But they talked a lot about, when they made the investment, shared values, a shared vision of building a clean net zero world, and that aligned with their priorities. Ericsson, you can see the announcement, the Ericsson CEO, when he's making the announcement with our Prime Minister. Actually, both announcements, our Prime Minister was there, but you can see the announcement, and he talks a lot about shared values. He talks about a shared love of hockey. He talks about, though, a common bond between our countries and a common vision of where we're going. He talks about our similar social welfare systems. He talks about how you want to have, ideally, your company culture match the country culture in which you're investing. And he found that the values in Canada were very much aligned. Mentimeter is another one, just very quickly, I'm almost done. Mentimeter, I want to mention Mentimeter because they also established their first international office in Toronto. And they talk about talent and access to the US and ease of setting up an office and all of that. But they also talk about shared values and common values and how important values are. Where do you want your family where do you want your kids to grow up? And they feel right at home in a place like Canada. So just quickly, the values that a country projects, and I think this is really important, the values that a country projects through its leadership, through its business leaders and its political leaders, really have a profound effect, in my mind, in terms of attracting, retaining talent, and building a really sustainable and dynamic innovation cluster.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much from the Sweden of North America, then. Thank you very much. Big round of applause. Thanks for having. Thanks for joining us. Lessons from Toronto, Canada, everyone. Lots to take with us onto the following two conversations. Now we move on to the business angle, if you wish. And I'd like to welcome up on stage Eva Fors, Managing Director at Google Cloud in the Nordic region, and Frederic Laziou, CEO of Puzzel, both based in Stockholm. You both worked most of your adult lives in tech, in the world of tech. Eva, if you wish, in big tech from Microsoft and Google.
Not
and
always, but most of my time, yes.
Most of your time, good. And Frederic from a range. Just very, very briefly, just introduce where you sit in the tech ecosystem today.
Sure. So I'm right now running Google Cloud in the Nordics, based here out of Stockholm. And Google Cloud is our business-to-business organization where we are serving companies and the public sector across Nordics, not the SMB. The SMB is taken care of by Ireland, but a little bit sort of smaller enterprises and all of the above.
Thank you. Frederic.
Yeah, so good to see you all, Frederic Laziou. So for the background, as you can hear, I'm from France, but I've been living in the Nordics for the last 20 years. Actually, not the Nordics, in Sweden for 20 years. In terms of business, today, leading a customer experience platform called Puzzel. So we help local brands to engage with their consumer base. We do that in the Nordics, in the UK, and in Netherlands. We passed the garage phase, so we're roughly a 60 million euro AR business, private equity backed. And I'm so keen about this topic because of that talent and how we attract people in our region and keep the Nordic DNA even when we go abroad.
We're super keen too. Eva, you're in big tech. What are your initial thoughts after reading the report? Is it painting a fair picture?
I do believe it does, even though I think that sometimes when we're talking about different cities, and a little bit back to what Emily said, because when you have San Francisco, and I love San Francisco in California, I would say that it's not really San Francisco that's the hub, it's the Bay Area that I would say. You know, and that separates that number one from the rest that you have in the report. Because to me, San Francisco is not a city. It's the Bay Area that is where all the buzz is happening. Very little is unfortunately happening in the city center. And that's both for good and for bad. So that's one caveat that I think that it's a little bit unfair to put San Francisco. It's like Stockholm Skavsta. When you enter Södermanland and you land there, that's very far away from Stockholm. A little bit same.
Did you just label San Francisco Skavsta? No offense. No offense.
You did. I didn't do that. No, and then I also think that very much that the requirement, it puts a lot of pressure now. I guess we are all waiting now for the AI Commission's report. And I have a colleague that is part of the AI Commission, so I feel very good that they can come up with some brilliant ideas. But definitely, we need to shape up there. So I think you have made a very, very good nudge there that we need to elevate and we need to support from the governance side. I just read, and I guess many of you have seen the new Global AI Index, where Sweden was last year number 17, now number 25. Where do we really, really stand out? Well, it's when it comes to the government support. That's where we are ranking 57. And then you can say 54, Mauritius. 55, Ghana. 56, Vietnam. 57, Sweden. That's not where we should be. So there is quite a lot of heavy work to be done there as well that I would really like to
Thank you, Eva.
Get so much.
Frederic, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs in your role as well. Do you think the report reflects accurately on sentiments?
Yeah, so yes, but and for maybe for the context, I am an pessimistic, which means that there's two angles. When we look at it, or when I looked at it, first there's a little bit of, I don't want to end up Stockholm and Sweden to an extent in complacency, and I think you raised that. I heard the word previously today, complacency. We've been great. But how do we sustain? This? And I think it picked up on all my pessimistic side of all the challenges that we have about how do we attract, how do we make Stockholm not only an attractive place for the talent but for the employer. And I might pick up on that a bit later.
Yeah. Eva, Emily mentioned pace is probably the most problematically defined measuring thing in the report, and how this was a real divider between the likes of the Bay Area, if you wish, New York and London, and the other European tech centers. Google, Silicon Valley company, how do you feel the sense of pace differs in the ecosystem culture?
Absolutely. And I think pace is of essence. You know, we all have 24 hours, no more, no less. And it's not that we should put in more hours, but we need to think about the throughput. And I speak a lot about beat per minute. So what's the beat per minute? It's because we need to increase the beat per minute, because we need to increase the throughput. And what I think we can learn from the US is the way they look at things. Here I believe that we are sometimes spending too much time on things that will never fly. Whereas I think in the US, they have a much more sort of emotional things about, first they build their heart into something. If it doesn't fly, they move on much quicker. I think we are spending too much time on things that will never be successful. So we need to kill darlings much faster. And we need to be a little bit more objective. I think we need to do the view from the balcony much more often. We need to make sure that we get that throughput, because it goes a little bit too slow. So pace for me is definitely that beat per minute. And again, pace doesn't require necessarily more man hours, but it requires focus, it requires the North Star, and it requires sort of what's the desired outcome. So you need to be much more outcome based. And that's also something I believe that the Americans are much more outcome based than we are necessarily.
But you keep the fika.
Yeah, definitely. We do the fika, but the fika is an interesting one. I was just thinking about when you talked about the fika, and I love it. I know when you start at Spotify, you learn fika, one of the first thing in your intro day, and the fika is a good thing. And it also goes down to here, what I think separates us and gives a good foundation is that we have much shorter commutes in general here in Stockholm and in the Nordics. We can meet, and that makes our triple helix more effective. We're not only meeting at big symposiums, but we can meet on an everyday basis, and we can do the fika for sure.
So kill your darlings and more goal-oriented. So Frederic, do you agree?
Absolutely, and all that comes to culture, and I think that, when we look at the fact that we have a fantastic safety net in Sweden, which means that we know that if we start a business, there's no income, there's no investment in, but I have my healthcare and everything is kind of taken care of. And if I fail, actually, it is taken care of, which is fantastic because we take the risk to start these businesses. But at the same time, the fact that we have this safety net makes it pretty comfortable and probably with less ambition. And this is why you were mentioning in your introduction, Peter, a lot of the unicorn, the success stories. But actually, there's a lot of Swedish businesses that disappear very early on, sold to American companies. And the reason is that they could have pushed a little bit further and built something bigger, really European global leaders, instead of disappearing.
Is that because they're comfortable?
That's my perspective, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's even more in Norway, I would say.
Definitely.
Why is that?
I think that also comes down to culture.
That's culture,
It also
absolutely.
comes down to that, the big oil fund will take care of everything. So no matter what happens with me or my family or my business,
Which was interesting to see, by the way, is that one of the 3 countries where we're bringing people from was Norway, and that's one of the things. I spend roughly 2 days of my week in Norway, and the ecosystem is not very vibrant. We have the chance in Stockholm here to have a vibrant ecosystem.
The Canadian ambassador talked about Canada's efforts to attract and retain high-skilled workers. You could see from that little chart that talent popped out as a big challenge for the tech community in Stockholm. And the tech scene doesn't exist in a vacuum by itself. There's the housing market. We mentioned that it might be tougher in the Bay Area, but it's still tough here. Infrastructure, safety, cultural attractions sort of all play in. But Frederic, with your experience as well from a number of markets, do you think that we have unique attraction problems in Stockholm?
So the answer is yes. And to answer this, let me give you an example. So Puzzel, we operate, as I mentioned, in the Nordics. And I'm going to compare 3 countries: Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So let's assume that we have a senior employee in Sweden, and this person owns roughly 80,000 crowns a month, so roughly $1 million a year. It's going to be the same number in Norway and roughly 650 Danish. So we will get the same talent for the same salary. However, what does it cost to us? Do you have an idea? So I'll start with Norway. Norway is going to cost us 26% on top of this million. In Denmark, 11%. Sweden, 51%. And that's the numbers. We ran the numbers last week because we say, okay, we are in, as many of you, budget processes. Where do we allocate the resources? And I have an envelope and say, where do we deploy that envelope? And that's the thing that to me is worrying because of, yes, we all have the same trouble, but the politicians and everybody putting in place the frame should look at that because of actually even that we believe in the Nordics, actually we will deploy people somewhere else than Sweden in that case.
And that could be a root of the talent issue being lifted here, as the talent could get a better salary elsewhere?
Absolutely, and they will probably get salary. Then, of course, we need to, on the positive side, is that everybody that we've been importing in the Nordics and Sweden specifically enjoy the quality of living, which plays a lot, and maybe because of the pace is slower. And that all that goes together. This is why I'm worried that if we don't change the rules, that we will not perform in the next 10 years.
Eva, do you agree? And also, do you see any specific unique attraction problems that are Stockholm rooted in this case?
I think Frederic covered a lot of them, which is spot on. I also believe, building upon what Jason said, that we need to ensure that it's much easier to bring in people from from other countries and make that process much faster. I also see the way I'm attracting people to the markets. It's easier for me actually to do it both in Helsinki as well as in Copenhagen. So bringing people in is actually easier both in Helsinki and in Copenhagen, both with regards to the processes of doing it, and also Denmark have a much higher salary level. So people from the outside were initially thinking of going to Stockholm, and then looking at the envelope saying, no, I'd much rather be based out of Copenhagen.
So it's costly and complex.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add, so now we speak a lot about bringing in talent, but it's like if you're in SaaS business, yes, you need to learn, but you need to renew your customers. Same goes for talent. And one thing we don't speak a lot about is how do we retain these talents? And in a previous job, we had this issue, we had a challenge where talented, he was from Afghanistan, studied at KTH, so top-notch academical background, started to work with us because he could extend his visa for 2 years. I think it's 2 years after university. Maybe someone can validate that. But anyway, started to work. He learned Swedish. He was a fantastic employee, a good resident, paying taxes. And we told him, say we, not us, the employer, but we didn't renew his visa. So he had to leave. And to me, that's something that we should look at, or we say we as a community, yes, attracting, but we need to retain. And I think Canada, what you described, doing it very nicely to attract, but Sweden, we need to look as well to retain.
Exactly the same thing. We've had exactly the same problem, had to move people out to Switzerland, to Zurich, which is just a shame.
It's a shame. I agree.
This morning in Dagens Industry, there were an article, and I think that out of all international master students that come to Stockholm, we keep only 1/3. So, no, not even 3 out of 10. So 7 are leaving somewhere else. And it's fantastic talent that we should capture.
Also looking at what the Wallenberg Autonomous Systems, so the WASP Foundation, bringing so much, I think it's 600 PhDs right now, but then you need to land them also in the ecosystem. You need to ensure that those top-notch expertise actually has a place to land in, and we see that, unfortunately, we are not very good at capturing and making sure that they are staying.
I suppose that comes down to the collaborative approach as well. I want to touch on another point as well. So in our report, we reflect on how green and clean tech, impact tech, whatever you want to call it, could be a real USP for Stockholm. And I suppose the thesis there is that a city of Stockholm size perhaps can't be super competitive on everything, but you need to find your... may need to find something to be really good at. Eva, do you agree with this statement? And if so, do you think this is the right direction for Stockholm to focus and hone in on something?
I think this is an area where we definitely can, place ourselves in a different perspective. So we should double down. And to your point, we cannot be good at everything. So we need to narrow down. So I think both with regards to, the sustainability areas, which we can get a lot of focus attention, we have the foundation for it. Similarly, we also need to think about responsible AI. I think that responsible AI is also an area where we can really double down on, and the whole conversation around being ethical AI and how we apply it in a good way. So the areas of there, I think, is both very, very relevant for Stockholm to double down on.
I'm not sure we can actually on the first topic on green and sustainable. I wish, but I still wonder, and it's an open question, is are we just trying to making up the pig, or I don't know how to call that, lipstick on the pig, but at the end, do we have the capabilities? Do we have the ecosystem to lead? So at the end, what the tech businesses you mentioned, the Klarna, Spotify, King, and so all that. Why have they succeeded? And to me, it's a lot of the intersection between technology and creativity. And that's why it's gaming. That's why it's media, and at the same time, fintech. So we know that we have the talents. They've done it before. And going back to talent, we need people that've seen the movie before. And not only we speak tech, we think developers, but not actually in the exec teams. Someone that has done it before, and that's not easy. So I think that would, if I had to place a bet, that would be that and deep tech. Deep tech, Finland has succeeded very well with Silo that just got acquired by AMD. France has succeeded in AI with Mistral. But Sweden, we haven't really seen that. And we have the academic ground to build these businesses.
I think the wash point for green is China, because China you're investing a lot. So I would say I would have less of that worry in Europe, but more that China is doing a lot of things right in that area.
Now with
which
American
is a bit scary.
state support as well. I have so many questions that I want to ask, but I'm going to have to wrap this up. Final thoughts. Emily touched on the need for national goals and goal setting, and we know that other countries have set goals. Do you think we need goals, and if so, what do you think our North Star should be? Briefly.
Absolutely. What measures gets done a little bit. And obviously I've lived the majority of my life in big American companies. We love OKRs and we live by them. And I think it's quite efficient because it set the North Star. So for me, I think it's important. And that's why I'm so curious about what the AI Commission will come up with. So I think we need to set the North Stars when it comes to, how we do the investments. How are we, bringing up the skills, so the skill levels. How do we ensure that we, get on par with on the AI side? So we should definitely set the OKRs. Then you can always adjust OKRs. That's a good thing with OKRs. So it's like Volvo. They said, no, we're no longer going to do, electrified cars for 2030. It was an ambition, and now we kind of move it on. So, but I think it's super important to set those North Star and clearly articulate them.
Thank you. Frederic?
Since you mentioned OKRs, you all know that OKRs are valuable when they are cross-functionals or cross-teams. So yes, goals, and I'm not here to define them. I don't have this ability. But my ask would be to this community that they are not defined by one group of stakeholders, but really defining these OKRs between the public authority, the private, the academia, because that's when these 3-4 key stakeholders, and I think you mentioned it, Mr. Ambassador, that's when we see the beauty happen or the magic happen.
Frederic, Eva, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for our final session of the day, we're digging into the politics of it all. It's my great pleasure to welcome up Khashayar Farmanbar, tech entrepreneur, former Minister for Energy and Digital Development, and a social democrat. And Anna König Jerlmyr, currently CEO of Arwidsson Stiftelsen, former mayor of Stockholm, and a moderate. Welcome back, I should say, to the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. You are no strangers here. I'm going to open with the same question put to the last panel. What are your initial thoughts, Anna, after reading the tech report? Did anything stand out to you or surprise you?
No, I think it's so much valuable insights, and we have to learn from the other cities that's above us. And it's about, the signals sent from politics, both on a local level and also on a national level. So it's about attracting talents, both locally and nationally, of course, but also to be this, as Macron was mentioned in the report, the startup capital or the startup nations, to have this vision and working together with academia and business and the public sector. We can do that on different levels, like pacts and so on, but it's time to act. If you look at the brain jobs in Stockholm today, we're also behind when you look at Eastern Europe. So we have a lot to do, and I think this is clear insights. It's just to learn and then to adapt and do more.
And Khashayar, same question to you. Anything in the report that stood out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to start by thanking for the report. An amazing good job with the report. And also, it kind of made my foundation idea of what we need to do even stronger, because it resonates with the 3 major things that I normally say that we need to do in order to succeed. One is innovation that requires talents, that requires an educational system that improves and helps creativity. The other one is quality of life, and that includes everything from living here in a good way, and also impact management, how your company's impact on other sectors will be. And the third is capital, the need for capital. And I would say that Stockholm really needs, although I heard Mr. Ambassador saying that we are good capital, I would say we need to be even better than that. We need more capital, we need sustainable capital in the way that we should have longer investors that can stay here for longer time in their investments. We need more risk-willing capital. We even need more stupid capital, honestly. I mean, we need more capital because there aren't going to be every single investment that's going to be successful. So you need even more stupid capital that will support the whole ecosystem. And I would say that's one of the main reasons that we really too often see small companies like my old IT company go up to a certain level and then sell or make an exit to an American or often US-based or multinational company. In my own case, it's back in Europe. At least Siemens bought them back. So, but still, I mean, we need to have that kind of gravity in form of capital to keep these talents and these companies in Sweden.
We'll come back to the capital side of it, but Anna, Emily said the response was pretty damning and clear when it comes to the sentiment of lack of political support. Is the tech community unheard?
Yeah, from now and then, absolutely. And we look at the business climate in Stockholm is also decreasing now. So I think that a great city to look at is London as well. They have a vice mayor in charge of business, and he used to be, the former one was a fintech entrepreneur from India. And he was great. I met him several times. We were discussing trade visits. You know, you do it on a national level. We wanted to do it city by city, Stockholm, London. And now they have another entrepreneur who's in charge of business, Mayor Khan, who's a Labour politician. He says, I want to be remembered for being the politician or the mayor that had the best business-friendly policy of all time. And I think that's what kind of leadership we want. And also to say that, okay, the tech sector is super important. It's about the talent, innovation. We need more of that. But I miss that kind of leadership.
And Khashayar, if we agree with Emily saying that politicians need to be champions of tech, what do you think politics should and could do?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with that word, because I really like the champions for tech. There are two ways of being champions for tech. One is good and one is bad, actually. One is just listening to companies say, so you want this, you want just for your company, you need to get rid of this regulation. Let's do that. I think that's not a good champion for tech. But the other good champion for tech is saying, in order for many tech companies to succeed here, we need to have this basis. We need to have an educational system that actually delivers true talents. I'm a little bit worried about the result inflation that we see in Swedish schools right now. What will that lead in the next level when these kids come to university? And champion for tech saying, so we have quality of life here, so you can attract talents, and it's really, really good to be here. And these are traditional Swedish parts. But I mean, the other part of being champion for tech is also, like Anna said, pointing out a vision. Where do we want to be? And in that sense, I think Sweden still have a lot more to do, and Stockholm area, of course. But I mean, Sweden as a whole has much more to do when it comes to pointing out the vision for the tech.
Well, let's stick to that one, because obviously we see other initiatives in other countries. We mentioned Macron here on stage, La France Tech, etc., setting ambitious targets for a number of unicorns. We see the same in Estonia. We see in Germany, they set a startup number and companies in high tech, etc. Should we set targets too, Anna?
Definitely. And I think also it's great. We often also agree on that we should have a common vision between the big parties in Sweden for Sweden, and say that we want to be future ready, that kind of vision. And it could include startup visa. The Draghi reports also suggest that. It could also be tax incentives that we talked about, or the research. In December there will be a new government bill when it comes to investments in research for the coming years. years. And I think it's really important that we have also excellence, that we invest in deep tech, in AI, and all that kind of things. And then we get the business on board, as the ambassador was mentioning. The public sector that can... the business sector and others, the public sector, and then we can have this common vision about to be future ready. That's crucial. That's the signal sent that we on board, and we're going to change the regulations or improve the quality of life for the talents here. We're going to have a national talent strategy as the other cities around the world. I can't just imagine that we're not having it here in Stockholm and Sweden yet. If you go to Helsinki, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, you can get a permit in like 24 hours or 2 weeks. It's not possible here, and I think it's a scandal if we're going to talk about talent attraction.
And talent attraction was a hot topic during your time as mayor as well. And Frederic mentioned like how the domestic pool is too small as well. So we need to attract foreign talent. Obviously, process for visa is one of the issues. What else do you see as unique Stockholm problems when it comes to attracting talent?
But also that was mentioned before, to make them stay. If you look at the PhD students at our university, many comes from other countries, but they are leaving as well when they graduate. And I think that we need kind of a strategy how to have soft landed and include them also in Sweden when they stay. So I think that is very important. And I'm actually in the quality of life program for UN Habitat, and Toronto is one of the cities. And this summer we had a discussion, a roundtable in Singapore. And they mentioned before the Amazon was established in Toronto, they have this pitch for the city. And they had all the figures about, headquarters or flight connections all over the world. We usually do that in Stockholm as well. But they asked 2 questions. How is your bicycle infrastructure? Because our employee want to take the bike. The next question, how is the education system? How many are ready for gymnasium? How many is not making it through the primary education? That was the 2 questions. And they had to rethink, their offer to Amazon. And I love that story. It says so much about, what we need to be prepared of for the future.
And that's super interesting. And the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce launched a bicycle map, a suggestion to the city government on how to make Stockholm more bike friendly. For those of you who wonder if we sit on that chair as well. But Khashayar, I love your term "stupid capital." I'm going to keep that one. But we see other countries providing tax credits, as Anna said, and financial backing. There are government investment vehicles in other countries trying to support tech businesses. And you mentioned like there's a gap in the funding market as well. Is the public domain doing enough to support businesses in that space?
Public domain should definitely do more. I know during the last administration we had additional funding for example, Almi and the startup funds and the startup bed to pump in more taxpayers' money into the innovation system, and we need to do even more of that because that's where we lack. And just touching on not to be too political, but just touching on talent acquisitions, I think what Anna says is much better than paying people to leave our country, which the current government is doing. But let's keep it at that. But when it comes to political strategies, one is funding. I think one other part is Sweden is. I grew up in Norrbotten, in northern Sweden, and I usually say we are a small country in a cold, doesn't feel it right now, but in a cold, dark place of the world. And in order to succeed, we need to have friends, lots of friends. European Union is one of our friends. Still, if I start a company here in Stockholm, it's not as easily for me to sell my products to Germany, France, Italy, as if I would start it in the Bay Area and start selling it in New York or Washington. And that's one of the issues where the European internal market is as large as the United States, but we are not actually able to utilize it fully. So that's one of the political drives that we really need to drive home in order to make a better marketplace for our companies. But of course also putting in more governmental money. Can I just mention something close by? And
shoot.
Yeah, it's very hard, dangerous to give a politician carte blanche to talk. One of the things that I really would see us do when it comes to setting goal is for the AI. I mean, when we created 400 years ago these amazing companies like Ericsson, who's still a great player in the market and on creating mobile networks, we didn't say that we're going to be the best ones at using mobile phones. We're not going to be the best ones talking in phones, but we're going to be the best one on communications. That's kind of what we need to do with AI. Right now we are saying we're going to be the best ones that are using the technology that is coming from somewhere else. But we need to set a goal to say we want to be the best. Maybe we won't be the best. Who knows? Maybe we will. But at least we need to aim for that. And that cojones or self-confidence we need to actually muster up in Sweden.
And on that note, sort of a New York Times article last month hailed Sweden as outperforming its European counterparts when it comes to improving competitiveness, and that's very much a theme of the Chamber as well. And we just had the Mario Draghi report published. Although not outright, he concedes that Europe needs to legislate less, and that overregulation on things such as AI, as you mentioned, has had a negative impact on companies' competitiveness. And do you agree?
Yeah, EU regulation is not my specialty today, but I thought it was very interesting listening on Unleashed, on your fantastic program there, when they said that Europe is regulating and US is innovating, and China is perhaps looking at us and making alternatives, but exactly, but like, so it's not. I mean, we can clearly see in this report as well, it was presented today, that the competition is high when it comes to the talent attractions, investments, research. So Europe needs to work much more as a single market, much more. It's not functioning today as well as it should be. And I was listening to Mario Monti, who was from the beginning, creating this single market. And today, even like he says, there's so much more efficiency we can do with the regulatory framework. So to start, when we talk about Sweden, I think it's very important to talk about our country, the visions, but I think that more and more we should also see us as a part of EU and talk about, the region and the vision for the region, because clearly the investment is going to the US and Canada and other parts of the world today.
I'm just going to say, I'm not really sure that less AI regulation is going to be the hallelujah that everybody is hailing it to be right now. Look at when we regulated through European Union, the thing everybody hates to do, the GDPR, accept and deny or accept regulation. It became a world standard, even it was only European regulation. So we have the possibility, we have the muscles to actually enforce through the relations somewhere else. But look at cars. 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, 130 years ago, when the first Carl Benz rolled out the first Mercedes-Benz from his factory. No regulation, an insane product. You could drive it anywhere with no regulations at all. And I'm pretty sure that every regulation that we made during the 100 last years, the car manufacturer would stand up and say, this will hinder us from developing, and somebody else who doesn't have that will succeed much more. Sometimes it's what companies, such as my old company, would say, but you need to look at what is good in the long term. I'm not really sure that the criticism towards AI regulation, Europe's AI regulation, is as fair as it could be. I'm not saying I love every part of it, but it's in the whole, I think it's quite good.
I'm going to let that be the final words of the seminar today. Khashayar and Anna, a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, that concludes our seminar for today. Thanks for all our speakers, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. I hope you stay on and chit-chat and meet with some of the speakers as well. Thanks to AMF Fastigheter, Danske Bank and Osborne Clark, who also thinks that Stockholm should remain a capital of tech. And use this QR code if you want to find out some of the more activities happening in this space on a daily basis. We hope to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Bye.